everyone, welcome back to Fraud Prevention Collective. And today we are going to be looking at real estate investment scams with a specific focus on the Nigerian context. My name is Bukola Ogunwale and I welcome you back. As usual, we're going to look at stories and then we're going to pick the learnings from them. And I promise you that by the time you leave here today, you are going to have a due diligence checklist, a list of documents that you can look at every time you're trying to invest in real estate and confirm if this is a likely scam or it's a valid transaction. A few days ago, just this April, in Asokoro in Abuja, a fake agent scam made major headlines. An Abuja-based house agent was arrested by the EFCC for allegedly defrauding a client of almost 300 million naira. The tactic that she used is that she promised to facilitate the purchase of a prime property in Abuja in the prestigious Asokoro area. After she received the full payment, she refused to contact the buyer anymore. She became evasive and she would not provide any valid title document. Also, in this same month, a 1 billion naira identity theft syndicate was unveiled. By the EFCC, they recovered 4 land titles that were worth over 1 billion naira from a criminal syndicate that had stolen people's identity. These fraudsters had forged the signatures, the international passports of the landowners, and they had gone to the land registry to claim that their original title documents were missing, and they successfully reapplied for new ones in their names. And they were able to use this new land title document to sell to purchasers who exchanged value for the properties. And the only reason why the original owners found out was when the buyers wanted to sell the lands. Also, we have multiple stories of tenants from hell. People who would get into your house, become a tenant to you, and then successfully pose as the owner of the property, and they would sell it to unsuspecting buyers. In fact, in this particular case that I'm referencing, the tenant even requested for a 4-month grace period from the buyer to relocate. So he collected the buyer's money, he stayed back in the house for 4 months, and he was not the owner of the property. And so those 4 months gave him sufficient time to disappear before the real owner showed up from abroad. So if you're abroad and you're trying to invest in real estate back home, you want to watch this to the end, okay? And there are always red flags. Like I will always say to you, there are always red flags if we pay attention. In many of these cases, buyers rush into the deals without verifying the ownership records at the registry, at the lands registry. Because if they went to the land registry, for instance, to check, they would see that what this man has was a tenancy agreement and not a purchase agreement. Okay? The last story that I will share with you also involves billions of naira, and it's about a developer who had a high value off-plan property that he wanted people to invest in. So this man was arraigned for defrauding investors, and he collected the money from them. He said he would build a 52-unit estate in Lekki. But prosecutors alleged that he never even intended to build the estate, and he fraudulently converted the funds for personal use. We've all been there before. You've seen all these real estate companies on social media. They've come to market to you personally. They have these lovely plans of how they want to build the estate and the number of units that are still available, how people are snatching them off the market, and how you should invest because that land is opening up. There's going to be an airport, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. We've all heard those stories. Let me give you one more story before we go to the learnings. A massive nearly 1,000 units duplex property, a property where the developers had nearly 1,000 units, was forfeited in 2025. This was an estate in Abuja. It was forfeited to the federal government. And why? Because the property, the land on which the property was built, was allegedly unlawfully acquired by high-ranking officials. So even though they built the estate and people already bought into them, people were living in them, but if the government determines that the land on which the estate was built was unlawfully acquired, then everything becomes illegal, which is why you have to be careful, and which is why we are having this conversation today, okay? What you need to know is that, again, as in every other industry, this AI evolution has helped the fraudsters in the real estate market, because now they can generate photorealistic three-dimensional images that shows the virtual tours of estates that simply do not exist yet. And they also have learned how to use fake social media influencer endorsement to create that halo of trust around their phantom projects. And sometimes they go to actual influencers and convince them that they're actually doing something big, inviting them to be a part of it, offering them returns. And so sometimes the influencers genuinely advertised on their behalf, thinking that they were valid, okay? Also, we have the double sale fraud. This is still very prevalent. It is very common, where a single plot of land is sold simultaneously to multiple buyers. And usually the first person does not even know until the other person begins physical construction. And that is when the other person shows up and says, oh, this is my land, I bought it. And then the other person is like, this is my land, I bought it too. Okay? So usually whoever starts construction first has a higher chance of keeping the land. But what if everybody does their due diligence so that they don't lose their money, potentially? Another kind of scam we're going to be looking at today is government acquired land scams, where scammers will sell plots of land in infrastructure corridors, and they would not disclose to buyers that this property belongs to the government, because if they did, of course, nobody would want to buy the government property from individuals. And we see a very saddening example of that in the demolished Lagos Calabar Coastal Road properties. Loads of properties, huge investments, gone down the drain, demolished without compensations, because people had no idea that the properties that were sold to them were built on coastal road, were built on government properties. Now that we have all the stories and you and I agree that we should pay attention to this, I want us to look at the critical red flags that you cannot afford to ignore when you're trying to buy a property. The first one is the urgency trap. The agent is going to say to you, several buyers are ready to pay right now, and they want you to pay immediately if you want the land. What they're really trying to do is trying to get you to skip your due diligence. They're trying to get you not to check if the land is valid and if they are valid sellers of a valid land. Again, like I always say to you, don't be pressurized into dropping your money until you are convinced. So do not fall for the urgency trap, okay? The other trap that you should look out for is the personal accounts request trap, where a person who is an employee or a staff member of a valid real property company says to you, wire the funds directly to my account. I don't care if they are the CEO of the company. If the property document is acquired in the name of the company, then you make sure that your payment is in the name of the company. Not the name of the CEO, not the name of the director, not the name of the agent. Okay? And how do you know if the property is in the name of the company? You conduct your due diligence. You conduct a search at the land registry. Okay? So if it's a corporate property, then for it to be a legitimate transaction, you must use a corporate account to pay. You want to pay attention. Number 3, that's the third red flag, to in-process titles. Many of us have heard it. When you're trying to buy a property, you ask for the C of O, certificate of occupancy, and they say to you, oh, the excision is in progress, or this land is a proposed gazette property. Now, what that simply means is that the land still legally belongs to the government, but that, and sometimes they are right, sometimes they are wrong, excision will mean that the government is separating the land and wanting to allocate it. And if it's in progress, then it means that very soon, or not, the land is going to be gazetted. It's going to come out in the gazette that this particular portion of land has been allocated and no longer, and we won't say it no longer belongs to the government, because all land belongs to government in Nigeria. And what everybody has is a number of years. And so every time a person is selling a property, what they're selling is their unexpired residue on that property. So if a person has 99 years on the property, if they hold on to that property for 10 years and they want to sell it, then they're selling 89 years to the next buyer. And that's also something else you have to look out for when you're buying your property, when you're trying to acquire a property, to know the unexpired residue that the original like allotee has on the property. If you're buying a gazetted land or a land that has excision in progress, you must know that you are taking a gamble, because the government may or may not eventually release the land. The fourth red flag that you have to pay attention to is that if the seller is not going to let you walk the land physically, do a tour, use a GPS tracker to verify the coordinates of the land. If they will not let you speak to the neighbors, then you have to walk away, because more often than not, they have something to hide. Now, with land purchases, there's something we call a chain of title. Remember how I said to you that every property is in the government's ownership. So when the government gives it to a family for 99 years, the family then sells it to somebody else, or sometimes directly to you. We've all heard of the Omonile. That's family land sagas, wahalas. We've all heard about them. Some of us have had experiences with them. So they're families that own land because the government gave it to them, So ownership moves from the government to the family, moves from the family to the seller, and sometimes to you. Or sometimes it's just a three-way thing. It moves from the government to the family and then to you. So what you want to make sure of is that you must follow that chain to see if you have a perfected potential chain of title. You must ask for all the documents that you need, and in a bit I'm going to give you the list of documents. You must ask for all the documents that prove that that sequence of ownership from the government all the way to you is valid. If one single link is missing, do not put your money on it. If one single link cannot be traced, do not expose your investment to this legal challenge. Okay? Now, let's dive further into this. There are documents that define ownership. And if you're going to buy a property, you ask for this document so that you can go conduct your own independent due diligence. Again, don't just say they've given me the document, I looked at it, they look valid. No, you go to the places where those documents were issued, the government agencies, to do an independent verification. Okay? So, to trace your chain of title, The trail is this. The first major document that you should be asking for is the certificate of occupancy, the C of O. The C of O is the document that shows the root of the title, is the key document that shows the root of the title, that shows which family the government allocated this document to. Sometimes you don't have a C of O, you have a gazette that shows how this property was excised by the government. And many times it will have the exact description or coordinates of the property. Okay? So you are asking for the original C of O or a certified true copy of the C of O or the gazette from the seller. If the seller is not the direct family that the property was handed to, you are asking for the deed of assignment that your seller used to get this land from the people whose names were on the original C of O or the gazette. So you're asking for deed of assignment. Where's the document that the original owner used to give you this property and you exchanged money for it? You're asking for the original purchase receipt. Where is the receipt that shows that you exchanged value for this property? So these are root of title documents. Again, a C of O or an original gazette. Original C of O, original gazette. You want the deed of assignment that shows how the property moved from the person or the family it was deeded to the seller. And if you've had 10 sellers in between that cycle, then you're asking for 10 C of Os. When you conduct your search at the land registry, it's going to show you everyone who has bought that land and resold it. And so you want to make sure that you have all those, titles, how they were passed to this person, to that person, until now it's coming to you. Okay? You want your purchase receipt. You want your deed of assignment, like I said. Now that you have the root of title, you also then look at your own deed of assignment. So you want to ask for or present, it can come from your lawyer, it can come from their lawyer, a deed of assignment, which serves as the legal bridge that transfers ownership to you. It must be lawyer drafted. Do not try to draft this yourself. And when your lawyer drafts it, make sure that they include the exact coordinates and the survey. In fact, one of the searches you must also conduct is have a surveyor go and get the exact coordinate of the land you're trying to buy and go do a search as well at the Surveyor General's to make sure that the property they're saying to you on the title document is actually the same property that they showed you physically. And so you conduct your search on that as well. Now, you also want to make sure that you have the governor's consent form signed for your transaction. So we've talked about the root of title, we've talked about the new deed of assignment that is the legal bridge that is getting the documents or the property to you. Alongside your new deed of assignment, there is a form, Land Form 1C. I think the name has not changed. You use that form to get the governor's consent because no land can be validly transferred without the government consenting to it. Remember, every land sits with the state. Every land sits with the government, and what people are selling is unexpired residue. So you make sure your seller signs a Land Form 1C for you, so that when you want to perfect your own title, you present that at the land registry alongside your new deed of assignment. And there are also a number of other things that you have to provide. Now, if we're talking about family land or Monile protocols, you must remember that for every family, one of the things that the government evolved into doing is to have the family heads, the principal members of the family, sometimes about 4 of them, submit the names at the land registry that if we're going to sell land in our family, the documents must be signed by these 4 persons. So when you conduct your search, it will show you who those 4 persons are. So if an errant member of that family is trying to, sell the land to you when they don't have the authority to sell it, to sign deed documents and governor consent forms for you, this is how you watch out against that. You check for the names, the pictures of the people who were meant to sign. You show up at the signing ceremony. Yes, you should make a ceremony out of it. Do a video recording as they're signing it. Have your lawyer interview the family heads, and ensure that the people who are signing your document are actually the ones that are registered with the land registry as authorized to sign on behalf of the family. Okay? It does not matter if somebody is the eldest son of the Olorebi. Olorebi is the family head. It does not matter if somebody is the richest son in that family. If they are not the authorized representatives of the family at the registry, then whatever they've signed for you can and will likely be voided in court when the family wants to sell validly by themselves. So I promised you a checklist, and I've talked about them already, but this slide, take a picture of it if you're here for the checklist, the due diligence checklist, the essential land document checklist. So we talked about the C of O. We said that this is similar to the birth certificate that the government issues for the land, okay? And it confirms that the government has officially granted a right to occupy that land for 99 years. We talked about the deed of assignment, and this is the legal receipt that transfers ownership from the seller to you. But also, remember we said you must have gotten also the deed of assignment that transferred ownership to your seller. Okay? Without that, there is no legal record of the transfer. And we talked about how this must be drafted by a lawyer. We talked about the registered survey plan, having the detailed map of the exact coordinates, boundaries, and size of that property. This is to ensure that a search is conducted to confirm that your land is not in a government committed zone or encroaching into neighbors' properties. We talked about the governor's consent form. Land from 1C is what it's called in Lagos. This is the official state approval for your resale transaction. When you want to sell the land to you, you're going to sign all of these documents for your buyer. And this is legally required to validate any resale of land that is carrying the C of O. And then we talked about the purchase receipt, which is your primary proof of payment. It must include the names, the date, the property description, okay, amongst other things. This is the evidence of the financial transaction that has occurred. So, to recap, there are 3 steps that you as a potential investor must take if you are trying to invest in real estate within the Nigerian context. Once you find the land, the seller approaches you or you approach them. You do your technical verification. You take that survey plan, you take it to the Surveyor General's office. They send a surveyor to chart the coordinates of the land, and this will confirm whether the land is free of encumbrances, is free, or whether it's committed to government use. This is the only way to ensure that your structure does not face demolition 10 years, 15 years down the line. The second step you must take is the legal verification. This is a search that is conducted at the land registry, Alausa, Lagos, or at the FCDA in Abuja. This confirms if the title is genuine and if the land is unencumbered. Encumbrance sometimes means like bank loans. If the property has been used to collect money from the bank, then the bank has a right to that land before you. Okay, so you cannot buy land that shows that there is a loan on it because somebody gave that land to the bank to collect a loan and the bank is holding it until the money is repaid. If they default, the bank is going to sell that property to recover its money. So that property, even though it belongs to them legally, the right to it has been vested in the bank. Okay? If you're a diaspora investor, you can use Lagos Land Online to search remotely for some of these things. But it is advised that you speak to a lawyer. You can reach out to us. I'm a lawyer, and we have lawyers who can conduct some of these physical searches for you as well, which is the third step, physical verification. You have to go walk the land, tour the land. You have to go look at it. You have to go on a day when the seller is not going with you. You have to speak to the neighbors. You have to go see the local bale, that's the local chief of or the local king of that community. You have to go have conversations to see if there's no entanglement or family lawsuit or dispute that is already existing in a land they're trying to sell to you, and sometimes to see if the persons who are trying to sell it to you are actually the persons who have the title or the ability to sell that property. Finally, when you're trying to purchase a land, real estate as an investment, you must treat it as though you're conducting a forensic investigation. Before you drop your money, you must conduct your due diligence. I've said that like 3 times today. You must conduct your due diligence. It cannot be overemphasized. The law does not recognize your good intention. It only recognizes documents and a valid legal chain of ownership. Okay, so you need to engage a trusted, qualified lawyer. You need to engage a qualified registered surveyor. The fees are only a fraction of what you stand to lose if you don't do it. What you're putting in is way more higher, so you can afford to put in the payments to secure your capital. Okay, also be very wary of family introductions, friendships, referrals. While there may be good opportunities that this person is referring to you, you have to still conduct your due diligence. Do not substitute relationships for your investigation. Okay? And before you make your payment, make sure that all of these verifications are done. Because the moment you drop that money, then that's the end. That's the end. So all these 3 verifications, technical verification, legal verification, physical verification, must be done before any fund is transferred. Okay? Thank you for your time today. I trust that this has been helpful, and I will see you in our next episode of Scam Stories That Rocked Nations and the lessons from them. This is Bukola.